No.
Yes.
Lab's good.
Good?
Guys get everything to work out?
Yep. Made it through everything. There weren't too many problems. Wait till start May 30.
Yes, it's the last right.
The 31st. Yeah, 31st. May 30th. Yeah.
Thursday.
Yeah. So have 2 days 30.
You can start making it
We're going to start it here in about a minute. Assuming everyone has a computer. I don't think anyone's been on that. Folks read it. Or I know. It's called the Render Cloud with the Autodesk. It's on, you look up. Where's that Daniel? Daniel.
No, you can't log in.
Dan.
Yeah.
Can you explain the Render Cloud?
Basically, kind of the render cloud, what it does is you have to set up your views inside of Revit before you ever set it. It's basically kind of what you would do before you render it anyway. And when you have to install a piece of their additional piece of hardware onto your computer. Once you do that, it allows you to upload your file and the views that you want with the materials and everything already preset up to you, and it will basically render it for you up to a certain size. You cannot go larger. I think it was a 13 by 13 image, 13 by 13 inch image at 150 DPI or 300 DPI. I can't remember which one it was. They tell you on the website.
Too bad about you.
And we're looking at today. So you can't really do it from the school computers because you can't install any additional software onto them. So you have to do it from your own. And online.
Use that computer right there. Clint.
How do you start it? What do you do?
If you want to here, I'll kind of show you what it
Oh,
looks like
okay.
on my screen real fast.
Okay.
I'll open the sample file.
So I'm going to get started. If you look up on the screen, some of you are rendering for Studio. You guys have Studio presentations coming up, right?
Yeah.
Something like that, sometime, what, next week? Monday and Tuesday. So the question is, and this is a scene from the kind of play model that we've been working with in class. And when you take an interior render, remember I placed a bunch of lights into this space. And you can see the light is on the wall, but it's not rendering the actual lights. In Revit, we actually have to do a little trick. And this is the same view in one file. And then I've got, let's see. This is the next view. And I didn't do all the lights. I only did the one light family that was the 2x4 fixture. But you basically have to add another component to your light family. And that component is a lens that has a luminous glow to it. And then you have to turn down the luminous glow so that it actually renders, but it doesn't affect the rest of the lighting parameters that already come with that light source. And so I want to show you guys how to do that real quick. And then we'll get into some of the other topics. I understand there's thesis reviews on Tuesday.
Yes.
How many of you are participating in that? So like pretty much the whole class. and it's going all day long from morning to night, and then you're having a social afterwards?
It's like 1 to 6, and then the social starts as soon as the last research presentation ends.
But,
So you guys are gonna be here?
I know of at least one person that doesn't present until 6.
Okay. All right, we'll see. We'll try to cover as much as we can today, and then on Thursday, we'll try to wrap up a lot of the class and then just go over the final project requirements. Because most likely, I could probably come in and help people with their projects, but if you're all going to be pretty much presenting and then go into a social, seems kind of pointless, I guess. So, what I'll do is let's go over this stuff, and then Thursday, if you guys can, think about any last minute items that you would like to wrap up with Revit. I know some of you still asked about, doing construction documents, things like that. I can give a little quick presentation on how we actually work with construction documents using Revit. I didn't go into a whole lot of detail with that in this class, even though I was thinking that we might. I think it's more important that you guys get the modeling techniques. We've gone over, I think, pretty much all of the tools except for some of the miscellaneous ones we're going to cover today and on Thursday. As far as construction documents go, it's merely, cutting up your floor plans and your sections and, dragging them and dropping them onto a sheet of paper, and you're noting them, tagging, creating door schedules, and adding dimensions so that someone could actually build them. And it's really a kind of a technique that you're going to soon master once you're in the office, because everything eventually is a construction document. And it's one of those things where knowing all the tools that are available in Revit, it's mainly once you're in the office, you're going to be learning the actual how to do construction documents, and that's not necessarily Revit related. That's just the office procedure, and everyone has their own standards of how they operate from office to office. So you're going to have kind of different notes and way of doing things from one employer to the next. But I can at least give you maybe the basics of what you're actually doing, and show you on Thursday some of the 2D components that are involved with Revit, because Revit essentially is all about building the model. And once you get the model to a certain level of detail, you're cutting your sections up and putting them on a piece of paper, and then you're adding 2D elements on top of your model once you've got your model settled, in order to actually detail out, if you're looking at a wall section through CMU, you're going to actually be able to draw a 2D CMU block on top of your model, and you're showing all the, what the CMU looks like in section, because, Revit's not going to model that level of detail. It's just going to show you kind of a hatch pattern that's associated with it. But I can show you guys some examples. But I want to go over this lighting. It's actually a pretty simple setup, but pretty much every light that comes with Revit and that you are going to be able to download from Revit City or even Autodesk Seek. Essentially, if you remember when we were in the lighting family, so if you guys want to load up, and I'm going to cancel out of this and go back to one that I've got that's kind of the original. Let's go back to this guy. So in the kind of model, hodgepodge model that we've been dealing with lately, if you click on any of these lights, I'm going to just click on this 2x4 fixture that we've placed into the family, and just hit edit family so I can go into it. But if you remember, if you just download this family type from the class website and then open it just as a family by itself, and if I turn on the shaded view, you've got your lighting globe, or light source, if you will, a light source definition. And this is the component that defines, the light distribution and the shape of the light. And then if you remember, each light comes with its own set of properties that are associated with photometrics of the light. And we didn't go into all of the different settings that you can do, because most of the lights that you can get from Revit or even from a lighting manufacturer, when you download their actual models, already come with the appropriate light loss factor, the initial intensity, the initial color, that's in kelvins, and all these different things that the lighting manufacturer would know better on how to, what the actual photometric quality of that light should be. And so again, I didn't go into a whole lot of detail of this because it's really something that we want we actually don't want to set ourselves. There are a couple options here. There's, in this particular light, you can see that there's, in the properties, this button here that says emit shape visible in rendering. Now, I can click on that, but what that really does, and we can experiment with it a little bit, is it's going to actually show you this shape in kind of a dim manner in the lighting. So if you had a cone of light, you'd kind of see the actual cone of light traveling through the air. But one way to actually see the lens, and you can see that if I turn off this, I'm going to click on this and hide that element, that this and most lights don't come with anything but kind of the frame. And even when you're looking at like a can light, it actually just shows kind of the actual circle frame, but you don't actually see the lens itself because it's counting on that light source as being something that's going to shine down from this center point. And so what we need to do is add a solid shape to this component. And when you're working with lights, you need to be in a ceiling plan view. So I'm in this family type, and we need to look at it in a ceiling plan. And then you can actually see the shape of the light and all of its parameters. And again, this particular light has different sizes. So I have a 2x4. The light changes its shape as you change the parameters of the width and the length of the box. But basically what we need to do is add a extrusion. So I'm going to add just an extrusion, and it's going to ask you for your work plane, and you want to pick the reference plane as ceiling and hit OK. And then I'm using the draw pick lines command, and I'm going to pick the lines that are associated with the interior of this frame and make sure that I lock all of these lines to that frame, because remember, these light boxes are parametric, so they're going to change. And you want this shape to also change with actual light as it changes in dimension. Before I cancel out, I've got an extrusion start is set to 0 foot, which means that will be from the ceiling plane, and then the extrusion end is extruding up, and by default it's always set to 1 foot. So I'm just going to give it a little bit of a thickness, kind of like a plastic sheet of light would be. If you look up at the lights, I guess these aren't the perfect light to see, but that lens that's in the middle there, it's probably only like an 1/8 inch thick. Might be, somewhere around there. So I'm going to type in 0.125 inches or 1/8 inches and give that as my actual thickness of this material. So now I can look at this element, and you might want your extrusion start maybe to come just a little bit below the ceiling. I'm going to do a negative, maybe even like 1/32. Just so that you don't have any exact overlap between materials, because we all know from like SketchUp and also Rhino and then also Revit, when you have two surfaces that are meeting up exactly on one another, sometimes you get some weird renderings, or if the computer's trying to figure out which one has priority, and so sometimes you get like a checkerboard effect. So just by making that light lens come down just a little bit, we'll avoid that situation. The next part is, I'm going to, again, hide this light source. And I'm looking at this solid element, and if I select that element now, I need to apply a material to it. And if you remember, you can just select your solid material, and over to the left you have material, and by category, if I click on that, I'm going to create, and you can see we don't really have a whole lot of light or material options. So I'm just going to take this default material and duplicate it. And let's just call this light lens. I'm going to put a light lens 2 on mine because I think I already have this material in my main model. So I'm just making a unique name. And then once I do that, I can use my graphics tab, my appearance tab, and under the material category of glass, if you left click on that, and start to scroll down on all of your different materials that are available for glass, you'll eventually get to a light bulb and luminous translucent materials. And if you hover over, it's kind of hard to tell from the picture because all the pictures look white. But if you hover over and you can see the name, the first one is called luminous translucent orange. The next one's cream. So I want to find one that says luminous translucent white, which I can click on that. And then the next part is if you look at down here at the bottom where it says bottom right, it says self-illumination, and it's checked. If I expand that part of the category by clicking on the arrow, you can see that the luminance is set to something like 2,500 lumens, I would presume. And that seems pretty bright. Anything in 1,000 seems like it's going to be its own light source. And we don't want to conflict with the actual light definition that's already part of this model. And if you click on where it says lampshade interior, and you can see that there's this option here called dim glow. Click on that and it takes that luminance down to 10. That sounds a little bit better. And then if you look at your picture, it should update where it's not so overwhelmingly bright, and you can actually start to see that globe as part of that updated image. I can click OK, and then we can load this into the project. And because that was a light family that had all those different parameters set to it, we can override it, and that lens will now be part of every one of these lights that you place that happens to be of that family type. So now when you take a view, and I think I already have a view set up, and you click on the render, and I'm just going to do a view render, and when you're in the interior scene, you have the options for lighting scheme, and you have exterior sun, and then you have these interior options. You have interior sun, and artificial, and then artificial only. For the most part, you want to normally just, unless you have windows and skylights and things like that within the space, you have to kind of judge what you're dealing with. But you can choose sun and artificial, or you can just choose artificial. In this case, I don't really have any windows at the moment, so I'm going to click on artificial only, and I'm just going to do a draft render of the screen so that you can at least see how you'll start to see that lens. And so for every light that you place, you'll want to go in and add that little lens that's associated with it, and then you'll get a rendering that actually, is that because of my draft? So this time it didn't render my lights very well. What happened? That was the same exact steps I just did where I showed you that other rendering. I wonder if because I changed the quality down to draft, if it bumped it up to medium to test this out real quick. It would have been nice if I could specify render from the top down instead of bottom up, like you can in V-Ray. What's that?
You can tell it together from there.
Well, in V-Ray you can.
Really?
Yeah, like in V-Ray you can specify.
Wherever you hold the mouse?
No, there's actually some settings in the render dialog box under Rhino V-Ray that allow you to say, do like all over the place, kind of random, or you can do row top to bottom or bottom to top, and you can. I do that a lot, especially if you like have something that messes up in your rendering, and I re-render it. just to that point. So I wonder what my lights are. So for some reason I might have to bump up my luminance a little bit. Let me stop something here real quick. Stop this.
Wide angle.
Let's do this one. Okay, so for some reason I didn't like the fact that I did a negative 1/32 of an inch coming down from the ceiling. And I just placed it back to 0 and then my lights rendered. So you might ignore that one step. And of course I did a draft rendering, so I've got a lot of speckle here. But you kind of get the gist. You kind of have to trick Revit a little bit to show the light. And one last experiment would be, let me click on this can light. And this light actually doesn't have the option to show it in the rendering, so I'm not sure what that other option was going to do. The other part is with interior renderings, I'm going to look at a floor plan, and I don't have any windows in this particular space that I was looking at. I'm going to add these windows that we created from last class. I'm going to throw them in here. Of course, it's automatically tagging them. But so I've got these windows. When you're in the dialog box for the view and render, when you're in the interior artificial only section of the lighting, you get this button here that says artificial lights, and you can actually click and show and hide certain lights within your scene. So if for some reason you have too many lights showing, or you don't like the way that it was rendering because you had 10 lights in one spot, you're creating the hot spot, you can actually click on your ungrouped lights, and you can uncheck certain ones, and that would hide the actual light in the rendering, so it doesn't have that light source definition. That comes in handy when you have a lot of different lights throughout your whole entire project, and you can start to turn lights on and off that you don't necessarily need to see. The only problem is you have to a little bit guess which light is which. So again, it's not very scientific, but it's got the it's basically got lighting, downlight, recess, can, and it's just numbering them 11 through whatever. So you have to kind of play around with those settings. I normally don't mess with turning on and off lights. The other part would be if you're using interior sun and artificial light, you have sun settings, and you can click on that button, and you're able to specify what the time of day is, just like we did our exterior renderings from our bridge models. So I've got this set at 10 a.m. and then the next and I'm looking for a setting here real quick. There is.
Put the cameras there.
play around with your lights a little bit, make sure you can get that to work. And then I'm also looking at another option here when it comes to Windows. I'm missing. When you're in your graphic display options, which you can get to by clicking on 3D View 1 or whatever your camera view happens to be, over here to the left, there's graphic display options in this dialog box, and there's an edit button. You can also get to it by probably a shortcut, but I can click on that, and there's cast shadows, and then also show ambient shadows. Showing ambient shadows will give you shadows that actually are a little more realistic. They're softer shadows, kind of like when you look at a V-Ray rendering or any of these other renderings. When you look at a corner of an actual, in reality, when you look at a corner of a room, you see that as you get closer to that top corner, you'll see that you get this gradient effect of the shadow, kind of going into a dark spot and then eventually fanning out into different shades of gray. The ambient shadows will add that effect to your renderings. It also adds a lot more time to your renderings. So if you want really nice photorealistic renderings, you can click on that, but just realize you're probably adding a few more hours to the actual render. And again, like I said, there is no distributed rendering at the moment, except for if you can use that render cloud. But there's one other option here with interior renderings, and I'm trying to locate this real quick. Yeah, here we go. Okay, so when you're in the render dialog box, so again, I just went to view and then render. Down here at the quality settings, by default you can just set to draft, but you can go to low, medium, high, best, and all that kind of stuff. I can click on any of these, but I can also go down to edit down here at the very bottom. And we can again choose in this dialog box the draft, low, medium, and high, best settings. And you can see that each of these settings have ways of changing the transparency and the reflections and those type of components, but you can't actually change them until you click on custom, and then you're able to customize. And this would be like getting more into the V-Ray dialog box where you have to tweak all these different settings. But if I click on, let's say best, and so maybe I need to go to custom here. I can choose daylight portal options down at the very bottom, and you can choose for windows, doors, and curtain walls, anything that's basically a hole in your wall, to become a daylight portal, which allows a lot of light intensity to come through those particular locations. So I'm going to click on windows because I've got windows in this particular scene. Click OK, and then I'm going to do a
Can you show us where that was again?
render dialog box, and then under quality and settings, this drop down menu here, you can go to edit down at the very bottom, and then you get this box that shows up. And if you're, as long as you're in the custom view specific mode, you can then scroll down and click on this daylight portal options. And you can see in parentheses it says only applies to sunlit interiors. I'm going to click on Windows for now because that's what I have in this space. And then let me do a render and see what, and I probably need to change this also. Yeah, I've got interior sun and artificial light showing here. Click on render, see what we have. While this is rendering, on our class website, under resources, in the BIM methods section, and you go to articles and papers. Remember, I've got a lot of Autodesk University PDFs that are available. I've added one recently called Architectural Visualization with Revit, and that is a basically a class that was done at this CAD Expo. And again, this is for Revit 2011, but if we're in 2012, there's not a whole lot of difference between 2011 and 12, so this is still applicable. And there's 24 pages here that kind of give you, a lot of it is stuff we've already gone over, which has to do with materials and textures, but they give you, some additional tips that, we didn't quite go into a whole lot of detail about how to work with your own textures, and then how to deal with lighting and your different render settings and things like that. So you guys, as you're starting to get involved with your studio renderings, you might peruse through this document and just kind of look at what they have to talk about. It's not a whole lot of detail, but it might give you some additional options here. And then you can see here with this rendering with the windows, those windows basically kind of render as a lens, and you can see how I'm getting daylight coming through, and you've got a little bit of the bluish light from the daylight, and then I can still see my artificial light in here as well. And again, I was in a draft setting, so I've got the speckly look, but you start to see the options that you can do. And you can do that with any kind of curtain panel. You can also do it with a door. So if you had a door that was there, you could have it where, basically a whole bunch of lights coming through the door. So this option here with the daylight portal is also a good way to render interior scenes if you haven't gone through the trouble of actually placing all of these real world lights. Because remember, in Revit, it's not like in V-Ray where you place a couple lights and change the intensity and kind of do that 3-point rendering. You're actually placing real world lights like you would see in this classroom, where you've got the light spaced at 8 foot on center, and you'd have to place that all throughout your model. Now, some tips for you on rendering is that Revit uses the Mental Ray, rendering engine, and what that does is it's going to render your whole entire model for every view that you do. And some tips on how to speed up your render times, especially since we're dealing with skyscrapers, is that you want to turn off with your visibility graphics while you're in this view all the different components that you can't necessarily see outside of this view. And then it gets a little bit trickier too, but you can, if you can show like a 3D section view, you have my section box, and if you can maneuver, and it's not very intuitive in Revit, but remember you got this section box that's available that cuts through your 3D model. You can drag your section box to start to limit, how far up, even though I'm outside of this crop view, you don't want the floors all the way above this to be rendering as well while you're trying to render this one particular camera shot. So some tips have come across, when I look at a lot of forums, is to use your visibility graphics, start to turn off things that you don't see, and you can also, right-click on particular elements and, hide them in the view, and then also use your section box to further section off and compartmentalize your particular rendering that has to do with this view by itself. You can also turn on, while you're in this, if you don't have the section, you see right above section box, you have far clip offsets. And if you're just looking at this one particular space, and you can see my far clip offset is 76 feet away. And if you look at this space, I'm probably not I don't have a room that's 76 feet big. I might change my far clip offset to be something more like 20 foot. Maybe not. So you got to kind of play around with how far you can go. Maybe my room was 76. I guess it's more like 50. And basically the far clip offset is taking just like in other rendering programs, it's basically stopping your view once you get to the specified distance of, and I typed in 55 feet, and it's not going to render anything beyond that. So especially if you have something in the view that's far off in the distance, especially like your city block that's installed, within our hotel model. You don't want the buildings all the way, you know, at the other end of Manhattan being rendered at the same time. So use that FarClip offset, and that will help really speed up your render times as you get involved with interior renderings. That's kind of the short gist of interior renderings. Other than that, it comes down to your material applications and your textures, which we've covered, you know, along with the bridge project. So you guys should be able to notice, you know, you still use those same skills that you got into, even though we just kind of dealt with materials such as white and default and changing that. But you can select any of these particular materials and change those rendered elements as needed with your materials and textures. A couple other details I wanted to cover, and I'll just get out of that view. Any questions on rendering as far as the interior and all of that is concerned? You guys know about exterior rendering, so you know, you're dealing with your sun path diagram and then your time of day and looking at your shadows in that regard. One thing I didn't go over is slab edges, and I want to cover that for one particular reason, and that is, you know, we've got void openings through our floors, and you've got guardrail systems that are going around your floor openings, and a lot of times to add a little more extra punch to your project and a little bit more realism, because when you look at any building, you're not just going to have a concrete slab edge coming to the very edge of your opening. You're always going to have some kind of pour stop that's going to stop the concrete, and in some cases that is detailed along with your guardrail systems, but I'm going to show you how you could add, let's say, a C channel. A lot of times you'll see like a perimeter C channel going around the opening when you look at, you know, go into any kind of building these days. Or, you know, a lot of people will even put in even like a steel tube that might be at the edge. If you look around the School of Architecture, a lot of the detail happens to be a steel tube. And so in order to make a slab edge, we can, and I'm just going to use this model that we've been modeling in. I think I've got let me do a save as here real quick. So I've got this floor slab that I've been working with in this that one particular space. I'm going to let me turn on a section box and then cut this up so we can actually look into this room. And then in my level 1, I'm going to, within this space, I got too many things open. Okay, so I'm going to cut basically an opening into my floor so that we can then do a slab edge around it. And in order to do this, I'm just going to edit the profile of the floor, and I'm going to draw, you know, just some kind of opening here that we can apply a slab edge to. So in your hotel, you might have, you know, circulation space, and you've got this opening, and you've probably got a guardrail around it by now through some of the steps where you're going to. At this slab edge, I'm using this generic 12-inch floor. I'm going to make this a little more realistic and make it 5 1/4 or 6 inches. So slab edges, when you look at home and floor, and under this down arrow, you can see that if you're in a 3D view or even in plan, you can apply these. Down at the very bottom, there's this option for a slab edge. And by default, it comes with this, you know, Revit comes with this thickened floor slab so that you can do a lot of your turn downs on slab on grade type of construction. Now, we're not quite, there with our hotels because we've got a lot of elevated floors. So more likely, we're gonna have to customize our own slab edge. And slab edges work in the same way as our rail types that we've gone over, how to do railings and customize those railings and mullions and all of that. Has to do with under families in our project browser, under profiles, you're going to create some kind of profile, some section profile through this edge, and that's going to be a 2D element that eventually gets extruded along this whole entire slab edge path. What I'm going to do is go into View, User Interface, Recent Files, and we're going to create a new profile. And if I click on New, in your family environment, you want to choose just a regular profile. So that you've got profile hosted, profile mullion, profile rail. We've dealt with the rail before. I just want profile by itself. And you get taken into the family environment, and again, because this is a profile, it's not a 3D object, so you don't see all of those extrusions and additional elements that you can model in 3D. You just see the lines that you need to make sure that you're making some kind of a closed shape. Under family types, and then at the very top I have family category and parameters. If you click on that, it shows you that this is going to be a profile, and then down at the very bottom it has what the profile usage is going to be, and it's set to generic. But if you click on the down arrow, you can see that you can choose the option to make it a slab edge. I'm going to make that profile in the family category and parameters, family category, I've made the profile usage set equal to slab edge. And now I can use this as a slab edge element. I'm going to click OK, and I'm just going to draw, with the line command, I'm going to draw a shape. I'll do 3 inches out. I'll do exit out of that, I'll offset. Let's make something like 8 inches offset, and I'm offsetting it down. Doesn't really matter if you offset up or down, but I'm moving from top to bottom here. And then I'm going to continue drawing a C. So I've got my C, and then I've got to give this some thickness. And I'm just drafting and creating something that maybe is 1/4 inch thick. And I'm just going to offset all of these elements. And again, we have to have a closed shape. So I need to make sure I've closed that off and then trimmed and extended all of my profiles and my lines that overlapped. To be a little more realistic, I might just camp that down a little bit. So I've got this C channel that is a 2D shape. I've closed all of the shapes or all of the lines all together. They're one continuous line, or they're trimmed and extended to each other. And then I'm going to do a save as and call this, I'll call this slab edge C channel. And of course I could add particular parameters to this, so I could make it, parametric, but I'm not going to get into it at the moment because we've gone over how to add parameters extensively to items. But you could actually make this into various family types. So I could have an 8-inch channel, a 6-inch channel, and all these different dimensions. But I'm going to make this kind of this one-off element. And I'm going to load it into the project. And now when I click on Home, Floor, and then Slab Edge, you can see that when I click under Properties, I can only choose this thickened 24-inch by 12-inch slab edge. So you're like, well, where's my profile? If I look at my project browser and I look under Profile, I see that I've loaded this in. Slab Edge C channel is shown, so it's in the project. What we have to do is under Floor and Slab Edge, I want to edit this type and then duplicate it and give it a name like C channel, something that's obvious. And all this dialog box allows you to do is reference another profile. So you can see under construction at the very top it says profile, and you can choose the down arrow, and then because it's a profile that's associated with the slab edge, you can select slab edge C channel, which is the item that we just made. And then you can also give it a material. So I'm going to choose probably a metal steel type of thing and make it color red or something as soon as this loads up. Go under materials, and I'm going to come here and choose metal. Metal, steel, whatever, it's got some kind of color to it. Change this here. Now that I have that established, I'm able to now select it here in my properties, so I can select my C channel, and then all you're doing is hovering over your edge, your slab edge, and you can see as I hover over, I've got a blue line that is highlighted, and I can just start clicking all the way around, and then when I look at this in my 3D, you can see I've got my C channel that goes all the way around the slab edge. If you select that 3D element, over to the left you also have, well, first of all, when you actually apply that, you get these flip handles, so you can flip your shape just in case your profile happened to be backwards, you can flip it. And then over to the left, you also have vertical profile offset and horizontal offset. So if I typed in 2 inches under vertical profile offset, it basically moves this whole profile up 2 inches. And so you can, apply and set this to whatever kind of edge or condition that you'd like to see. So that slab edge could be any shape that you wanted to. And again, if you apply that profile, you can actually create a little bit extra detail that would be associated with your railing design and then your actual balconies. This would come in handy on your balconies, and then also your any kind of openings wherever you have guardrails established. That method of creating a slab edge is the same thing as if you look under roof and you've got fascias and gutters, which we're not really dealing with our hotel because we don't have a lot of hipped and pitched roofs and gable ends that we're dealing with. But if you wanted to add a gutter, or if you wanted to add fascias, if you're doing a house that happens to have these angled roofs, this is the same exact method. You're creating some kind of profile shape that you're then applying and snapping to edges of a roof, and it's extruding this profile along that entire length. You can also click on that profile or that slab edge once you've created it, and it's just like in the curtain panel or the curtain wall assemblies, you can add and remove segments. So I clicked on all of these and it created one continuous slab edge. I could also add or remove a segment, and I could start to click on and say, really I only want the slab edge condition to occur on these 3 sides and not this other one. Or I could click on this again. And if I don't have a continuous shape, you get these drag handles that you can also modify, exactly how far the C channel happens to go along this this particular floor slab. So I'm going to add a segment again, and I'm going to add this segment back. Now that would work the same as if I had a floor, and if I do down arrow floor slab edge, and I do this thickened slab, and I can select this other corner here, you can see how I get that slab edge, that turn down that you normally see when you look at a section of concrete slab on grade. When you get to the edges, they always turn it down a certain distance, because usually you have a wall that's bearing on top of it. You need some additional reinforcement underneath there. So I'm going to hit save on that. Any questions on slab edges? Another opportunity to add a little bit more detail to your hotels, and it gives you a little more scale and realism to all your different spaces, especially when you have your railing design there and all those other items that we've gone over. So another item that I haven't touched on yet happens to deal with just generic modeling. Everything that we've done so far has been with the conceptual design environment. It involved masses. We did the curtain panel pattern base. We did adaptive components. And then all of these different tools that are available within Revit having to do with walls, doors, windows, and our stairs and railings and so forth. Any kind of component or any element that we want to model that we can't figure a good place that it should be modeled under a particular template, like lighting or furniture or mullions or profiles, we can create things that are just called generic models. And generic models would be something that would be customized to kind of a one-off product. It'd be something like if you're doing a bar at the hotel, everyone's got to have a really cool bar. You're going to have a nice bar, tabletop and bar stools and all these things that you're probably not going to be able to download from Revit City and Autodesk Seek, because those are always kind of customized casework that's normally done for a project. And this is where you'd want to get into the generic modeling environment. And there's two ways of doing this. One is under a component, you can choose place a component, or you can model in place. If you model in place, this is very similar, and you can see the nice little image that they give you. Modeling in place gives you a family category that you can pick. And so I can pick an actual category like casework, and it gives you the name. It's kind of like modeling a mass in place. Remember, we kind of covered that with the bridge assignments. And as soon as I do that, I get into this family environment where I have extrusions, blends, revolves, sweeps, and sweep blends, and so on. So I could actually model this family right here in this project environment without leaving and going into a family environment. Or you could actually go under View, User Interface, and I'm going back to the Family dialog box or the Startup menu here, and click on New, and then just choose Generic Model. And there's a couple of different options when we're in the family environment and we want to model this kind of one-off element. You have generic models that are host-based, and then you have just regular generic model. You have to be a little bit careful about which template you use. Remember, we've used the generic model adaptive, but once you get into these other ones that are ceiling-based, face, floor, line, pattern, roof, and wall-based, those all require that when you bring this component in to the project environment, if it's a generic model floor-based, it's not going to be placed until you have a floor available for it to be placed on. So a lot of times I will just do generic models, because then there's no host element, and it's kind of this free-floating thing that you can place however you like. Now, you might want things to be hosted, and the reason you would do that, especially like something like ceiling based, is, remember the lights that we created or downloaded and installed into our model. When you host an element and you move that element, all of those hosted items move with it. So remember when we brought in the ceiling and we placed 20 lights into the ceiling, and then we adjusted the ceiling from 8 foot to 10 foot, as soon as we made that change, all those lights moved with the hosted element. That's why you would use a hosted versus non-hosted family. So, but for right now, I'm just going to go into the generic model environment. And this is where you can model very similar to how you're used to modeling in a lot of other 3D programs, with your extrusion, the blend, the revolve, sweeps, and sweep blends, and then you just have void forms. So I might look at a section or an elevation. I'm going to just choose elevation left for right now. And if I choose extrusion, I'm just going to draw like a I'm not going to be very precise here, but I'm just going to draw kind of a profile of what a bar might look like in my particular design. I'm just making this whatever the shape is for now. Close that. You know, I'm just basically making any kind of shape, and then in 3D or any plan view, you can extrude it and then start to apply other, you can continue to add on to this. So I can, model a little bit more. So I did the extrusion, we've all kind of done that a little bit. If you do an extrusion blend, that would be something like, if I get into a floor plan view, it has a couple different shapes. It's got an edit top and an edit bottom. So I'm going to do I'll just do one of these circumscribed polygons. And when I do that one, and then when I click on edit top, I can create the top of what the shape is going to look like and exit out. And then when I look at my 3D view of this, you can continue to model some additional solid masses. And these kind of act like masses, but they're just generic components that you can model whatever you need to. And you can apply materials, and you can also apply parametric qualities to these items. I'm just going to go over a couple of these other tools here. You've got your revolves, so you can create a 3D shape by sweeping it around a 2D profile or a particular axis. If I look at this in a left view, we do revolve, and it wants me to create a boundary line or an axis line. So I could create my axis line is right here, and create my boundary lines, and perhaps I'll I'm just making something up here, nothing beautiful. And then tell it to revolve when I'm done. And I get whatever shape is, and then you can specify its start and end angle. So right now by default it goes all the way around. I could change my end angle, so I'm only revolving it 45 degrees or 65 degrees or however far you want to go. If you want to cut voids into something, so I'm modeling all these pieces together, you can go into, you have to have the solid element drawn first, and then I can click on home, and I'll just do an extrusion. And I picked the wrong one, I went to solid. I'm going to exit out of that, and I should have gone to home, and under void forms, under this down arrow, you can see you have all these same options of void extrusions, void blends, all the same solid modeling tools, but in a void version. And then so just by doing that quick sketch, I can create that void. That's going to cut that element. You can turn that void, I could click on that, and I guess if I was editing the sketch, perhaps. Once you make it a void, it's a void. There is a method to change it from, you can change solids. Nope. I guess it's as you're modeling, you can change it. The other thing would be looking at your other items here. You have sweeps. So this is very similar to what we've done before with our just like in the curtain panel pattern-based families, where you take a section and you create a rail that you sweep a particular element along. And then a sweep blend does the same thing, but you can specify kind of an end shape and a beginning shape. And then you can model some additional components that way. So I'm not going to go into a whole lot more detail, but a lot of people are more familiar with these kind of modeling tools, and so if you find yourself kind of stuck trying to finish a space up, and you've got all these different elements that you want to put into it, this would be a method to model and then place this in. And again, this places in just like a family. So I've got all these crazy shapes here, but if I just keep my desk that I made and load that into the project, you're placing it just like a component where you can hover over an angle and hit the space bar, and it aligns with that particular angle, and you can place this on level 1 and the different floors. And so when I look at my space here, I've got my bar that's right next to the slab edge here. Nothing too fancy, but so a lot of times that generic modeling is kind of the last resort, I find, in Revit, where you've gone through all the other possibilities of how I might try to model or solve this particular modeling problem. Then if I can't figure out how to do it within all of these other different tools, that's when I might just go into my generic model and actually model this. This comes in handy when you get into complicated stairs and also getting into complicated railings. Even in the Autodesk University, this one particular element here called insanely great stairs and railings. They'll show you all these cool things that you can do with the stair tool and the railings, but it's somewhere in the text it also talks about, sometimes you have to, step out of the tool and not let Revit dictate everything that you can do, and allow yourself to, do some generic modeling. And they show you some methods of how to start with a stair and then add generic models to it. So you can also look at some of those PDFs as well. If you guys haven't explored these, and I know you don't have a whole lot of time for reading extracurricular activities while you're in school, but I'm leaving this this website up throughout the as long as I'm teaching this class, and I'm teaching it again in the fall. So you guys will still have your login. I'm not going to delete that off of this website. So you can come back to this at any time, but I would, if I were you, get on here and you can download a lot of this material I've pulled from different sources from the internet and try to put it on one location. And there is a lot of information in here that we haven't covered in class because there's a lot of things that have to do with the office environment that might be something a little more pertinent to you once you get your foot in the door and you're actually sitting down and working under a couple architects. You might find some of these other articles a little bit more beneficial to you as well. So go to this resources page as much as you can, and again, I'll keep these classes up here. The only thing that will probably change in the fall is obviously the class videos, and I'll talk to Dan here and Chris Bjorkum about their YouTube pages, seeing how long those are going to stay up with the videos, because I might just archive the embedded videos that are already on this so that you can always go back to a class if you remember some particular material. Someone asked about, I forget who it was, asked about phasing and even design options in Revit. Something we haven't gone into because basically, and I'll show you here real quick, but when you start working in an office, a lot of times most of your projects are going to be two parts. One, it's going to be a renovation project. So in order to do a renovation project, you're going to have to model the existing building based on probably existing CAD files, and then also record document information that is already someone's construction documents. But if you notice, whenever you look at your screen and you select an object, down here at the very bottom it says phasing, and we haven't really gone into this, but there's phase created and phase demolished as a set of parameters that are associated with every element. By default, everything is new construction because it assumes you're doing a new building. But if I were in level 1, and I'm just going to look at this floor plan, and I click on this wall right here and change this to phase created as an existing, you can see it kind of grays out. I need to go to my find view. But it grays out and my new stuff is a lot darker. So by default it already kind of goes into the typical nomenclature and drawing techniques of what you would find if you're drawing something in CAD. Normally you would take your existing lines and make them really grayed out and light, and all of your new items are usually dark and a lot more solid and bold. But if I were to click on these windows, I'm going to click on these that I also put in here. I guess I have to do it one at a time, and I also make those existing. And then if I were to take, let's say this one particular wall, I'm going to add a new door, and I'll just do the whatever just came with Revit and stick it in here. By default, Revit already dashes in what's going to be demolished in order to put in this door. So when you actually do a demolition plan, and so right now I've got my phase filter for the view, it says show all, and it says phase new construction. I could go back here and say show new construction, and then show demo or previous and demo, and it takes away my door. And in a demo plan, you're basically always showing them the parts of the wall that you're removing, and it's automatically dashed in that location. So this would be something you'll probably toggle your view settings, and you can see, you know, just in the existing, it's just showing me that existing stuff, and it doesn't show me any of my new components that I had associated with this, this building. So then another drawing would be, I would have to duplicate this level 1. I can say duplicate the view, and let's say this other view would have my settings shown to show the completed new construction, and then I can see, you know, all those new items that we added that were involved with this, this project. So that's phasing. Phasing is view specific, and it's dependent on what kind of setting you do for each of your components. And so with each of the components you place, you're specifying whether it's something that's new or whether it's something that's old or existing. And there are ways to add more phases, because some projects are very complicated. You might have a phase 1, a phase 2, a phase 3, and you know, all these different phases, and you can kind of toggle how your project is you know, evolving from the existing all the way through construction, which comes in handy when you're dealing with the construction documents. The other item is design options. When you're in schematic design phase, you're probably, you know, half the time really sure about certain elements of your building, but there might be things like your main entry that you're playing around with different design options, and you can't really decide which option you would like to use, and you have to present, you know, 3 or 4 options to a client so that they can also get some buy-in on, you know, what you're trying to do, and you get some feedback. And what you would do in CAD is you would do a save as of your file, where you would copy your drawings and, you know, copy them off to the side and, you know, manipulate it a little bit more. Well, in Revit, especially if you've got like an 80 meg file, first of all, you don't want to do that, because if you've been working with a group of people in your office, remember, more than one person can work on a file at the same time. Someone might continuously be working and doing updates to your one particular file, and as soon as you do a save as, you're breaking that connection with everybody else, and you're modeling on your own, and nobody's realizing what's, you know, what's kind of happening with your different options that are available. Because you might want people to still model the rest of the building or work on the existing. So there is an option here to start to create what are called design options. And design options are also view specific, and they're a way of toggling your different options. And if I look at it, I'm going to go into a 3D view here. And I'm just going to copy this skylight real quick and kind of modify it, and these will be kind of maybe 2 different skylight options. So remember, we did our skylight. I'm going to copy it, copy this in. Well, since this is going to be a design option, what I want it to do is toggle from one option to the other, and I want this existing or this, not existing, but this particular pyramid skylight that I created to be on one particular option. And so if I click on the element that I want to include in this option, and I need to make sure I'm selecting skylight, there we go. Down here at the very bottom of your screen, there's this little, it almost looks like kind of a notepad. It's called Design Options. If you click on that, you get a dialog box that pops up, and it allows you to name or create new options or option sets. If I create a new option set, this option set is going to involve everything that deals with the different design options of basically what I'm going to toggle on and off within this one set. So I'm going to call this option set, rename it, and call this maybe Skylight Options. Then option 1 underneath the Skylight Options is going to be set to this skylight that I've already added in here. And I'm going to add an option 2 just so I have that. I'm going to hit close. So I've made that activated. And when I click on this skylight, I can now over here in the, where's my, you get another little button that shows up here down to right next to that design options that says add to set. Now that you've set up your design options, you can click on add to set, and then you can see that under Skylight Options I have this dialog box with the 2 check boxes. I can just say that this is going to be added to option 1, and I'm going to click OK. So under and then within this view, when I'm looking at whatever view it might be, if it's a floor plan or 3D or ceiling plans, you can see that under the view properties, there's this option here called visible in option. I can say that this is going to be option 2 or option 1, or I'm going to show all the options. You know, maybe I'm going to show all the different configurations. I'm going to add another skylight here in a minute, and then we can toggle those on and off. So the next one would be, I'm going to click under my roof plan, and or maybe I'll do site. I'm going to select this. And it's not allowing me to select this because I have under here this checkbox that says exclude options. And it's not going to let me select it until I uncheck that particular option. But that, if I were to copy that, it's going to remain in that one particular design option. So I'm going to draw this other skylight again. And I'll do, let me go back into my roof plan. And I'm going to draw this under option 2. So down here at the bottom, you can toggle if you're in the main model, if you're in option 1 or option 2. And then I can start modeling. You can see everything grayed out while I was in option 2. And I can come in here and I'm going to do my sloped glazing. So roof by footprint. I'll do sloped glazing. And this time I'm going to make it where it's, you know, a gable and not a pyramid, just for this particular. Make those something drastic like a 1412. Did I not cancel out of my roof? So then when I'm in this view, I can just toggle my visible and option. You can see I've got option 2. And then I can toggle it to be option 1. So I can toggle back and forth. And when you're done, I need to activate it. Basically what you would do is model everything that you want on option 2 in that sketch mode, like I just did. And then everything that you want in option 1 would be modeled in that particular design view. And then if you had, let's say, 3 more different options, you'd keep doing that. And basically at the end, when the owner finally says, you know what, I want to go with option 2, when I click on this dialog box and I'm clicked on Skylight Options, you can see how I've got under option 1, it says in parentheses primary. I could say option 2 should really be the primary option. And when you're done, you can accept the primary, and it's going to delete all your other options out of this model, and then create this option as the one that you're going with. So before you do that step, you probably want to do a save as and maybe archive that Revit file just in case you ever do have to go back to another option, which does happen. But basically what it's doing is it's getting rid of all that external information that was, loading up your model, because every design option that you load into here is going to increase your file size. But it at least gives you the ability to use the same model, and then you can just kind of toggle on and off all these different options to present to the owner. And again, if you want to present the different options, you'd have to copy this view and then make different views, and you'd rename them as this is view that's showing option 1, the next one's option 2, because those toggles for option 1 and all the different phasing are all view specific. So they're similar to your visibility graphics, turning things on and off. That's all I have for today. Like I said, on Thursday, I guess will be our last class for the night class. Computational practice, we're going to have to figure out what we're doing with that one. But I'm going to go over the final project requirements of what we're going to do for our hotel projects. If you guys have any last minute items that you want to know about regarding Revit that you want me to go over on Thursday, please email me between now and then, and I can make sure to try to address those questions that you might have. Yep.
How do you get like railings or limited sketches to join?
They don't. Yeah. But what you can do is model, this line in this sketch, and then
In this sketch or in the stairs?
in the stair sketch, you can actually make it turn onto the floor and just make sure it's not posted to the stair, and it should kind of automatically join. But you might still have to make it not be a continuous line, but draw this line and then draw another straight line here. You might have to have a little bit more of an offset, because if you know in the code they always say that extend your railing like another tread, right? Has to get it so that you can eventually get low enough so you can make that joint. So you have to force that to
Favor the bib.
you can just right click on that railing. Very similar, and then just draw this sketch on the other standard.
It's okay. It was in regards to the bib Revit Cloud.
I would worry.
Website. It depends when it's like 3 to 5 hours.
Takes it out, and you'll have to make sure that they're
Less than that. 20 to 30 minutes. Like if you send like 8 files,
make sure that
it occasionally goes, like I sent it one day.
or you can model them in different.
Just one of the images, like one of the preset images. Because what happens is like if you send it during the day, that usually have a lot of like I set up the
You
file.
may have to
It's over.
check
I'll put
it,
in
make sure
at 9
that
o'clock, and
it's
I'll just
right,
tomorrow morning.
3D, because you may
Whether
have
it
to
only
post
30
it.
minutes later, all email. Versus one time I put it in the morning and it took them 6.
Oh, it's right there.
hours.
Yeah, so you might click on that and then edit the path and then say, choose pick new post and then choose to
Yeah.
exit that.
And I was hoping to do winter, summer, I've been here all day, just for
Yeah.
summer, so I can't afford to stay here when I'm here for winter. So how do I do, like, send
You
it
just
to
keep
me now?
kind of doing that
I mean,
as
can I
as
just
needed.
send them the file and tell them I want it every?
And so a lot of times what I do for joining
It's
your floor with the other one is I extend my
it's set up through your
stair
It's not like
railing, I
you can't
extend the
email it,
sketch
it's
out,
just
like,
you
let's
have
say another
to-
tread.
There might be an option
Yeah.
for that.
And then I'll make it extend out and then turn, and then I make the other one butt into it.
I see.
You'll get a line there,
I mean,
but
it's
when you
basically
render
the
it, you
same
won't see
file
it.
over and over again, just
Yeah.
different, it's like a solar study every 15 minutes.
Oh, I'm not sure if that works.
Nice.
The solar study is quick, that's not a problem.
Yeah.
But the rendering every 15 minutes
Yeah.
takes, every rendering takes me like 45 minutes.
1 second.
I never do it last.
During the.
That